Today's guest is Xannie, creator of the BPD Bunch. And if you've ever been told you're too much, this one's for you. Because Xannie isn't speaking about borderline personality disorder like a textbook. She's speaking as someone who lived it, studied it, and then built one of the most loyal online communities around it. Not by being trendy, but by being real. She lived the intensity, the favorite person dynamic, the attachment spirals, and then she got brutally honest with herself. Did DBT, became a Christian, studied psychology, and now she's bridging both sides, patient and practitioner, which is really cool for me because I was diagnosed in 2022 with BPD, and now I feel like I'm just coming on the other side of it. But back to Xannie. In this episode, we talk recovery, relationships, emotional regulation, and why Gen Z isn't just anxious. We're underskilled in the one thing that determines everything: how we relate. This is Xannie, and this is There More? Is There More is the podcast where creators share how their darkest moments became the breakthroughs that changed everything. We're building a space for raw stories, deep connection, and real hope for everyone who's still writing their story. Brought to you by Dialogue Life Skills, the world's scalable solution to the teen and young adult mental health crisis. I'm your host, Megan A. Tully, and I'm listening. Well, Xannie, welcome. Thank you so much for deciding to be a guest on Is There More? I really appreciate you opening up and sharing some of your story with us. First of all, tell me about your name.
So it is. I did not do a lot of Xanax.
I was gonna ask.
I will. Everybody is like Xannie, like Xanax. My mom wanted to call me Alexandra, but she didn't want to call me Alex because she thought that was just a very generic name. And I guess she saw a movie where somebody was named Alexandra and their nickname was Zan. So she just changed it to Xannie. So
That's cool.
that's it. Basically, my name is Alexandra, but Xannie is short for that.
That's cool. It's such a cool name. I've never seen it before, but I really like it. So you have a really cool podcast. Let's start there. It's called the BPD Bunch. And I feel like, that's how I found you, through your show. Would you say it's kind of like your public identity?
I don't know if I would say it's my most successful public project, I guess I would say.
And when did you start it?
The idea started forming in March of 2022, and we started working on it in August, and our first episode launched in November of 22. So 3 years.
In this time where people are really looking for human communities and content, what do you think is what makes your followers of the BPD Bunch and of your community so engaged with not only you but your whole community and audience? And how can other people sort of emulate that, who are trying to create online communities that are very authentic to who they are?
Authenticity, I think one of the things that trips people up is that people think authenticity is about them, but it's not. It's about your audience. And so you can share something that is technically authentic because it is true, but if it doesn't hit an emotional pain point for your audience, then it's not going to do anything. So overall, the BPD Bunch has done really well because we always try to imagine what someone in our past position would need to hear. And so, I think it's important to put yourself in the shoes of your audience. And, I also think knowing who your audience is important. Who are you trying to reach and what it is that you're trying to do for them. If you're trying to make content and build a community where people rally around you, you have to have something for them to rally around. And so I think a strong message and being more service oriented towards them.
While you were starting the show, who were you trying to become? Or where was your head at that time?
You mean like professionally or mental health wise or both?
Let's do both. Start with professionally.
So basically the story of the BPD bunch is loosely that I started on social media in 2017, just kind of posting about my mental health journey and my crafting projects. I'm a seamstress, and that's been like my primary source of income has been sewing. And in 2017, I also started I went back to school for psychology, and I was working at a seamstress shop. I quit my job and then I graduated. And I had been thinking about transitioning from sewing into doing mental health things. That was part of why I went back to school. And in March, I'd had this idea that it would be so cool to get people together from the online BPD community and create a group, like page show, something that got a lot of different perspectives together consistently. There's nothing wrong with the one-on-one podcast or anything like that. I think it's really good to get a really clear image of an individual. But for me, when that was all there was, it was like this one person's BPD recovery story and this one person's BPD recovery story. I wanted to be able to follow a group of people on a journey and show their relationships over time. And that was sort of my original idea, was kind of like, what if we could do sort of like friends with like the different archetypes, and get all these people together and show that no matter who you are or where you're from, whatever your life story is, it's possible to recover from BPD. And that was sort of how things got started. And so then after I had graduated and I'd quit my job, I was like, well, I guess I should start this. And then I had COVID in July, and it hit me really hard. And after the major symptoms had faded, I was still just so exhausted all the time. And so I had been thinking about this podcast for a while, but I was sitting on the couch. I couldn't sew because anytime I got up to use the sewing machine, I'd be tired after like 30 minutes. So I was just scrolling on my phone and I was like, you know what? I literally cannot do anything else. Maybe it's time to get this show started. So I started the YouTube page and I started the Instagram page, and then I put out an ad for people, expecting that a bunch of people would show interest and none of them would actually commit. So I like accepted everybody, thinking that most people would not have the energy to continue for it, and it ended up not really being the case. And so that was, I guess, the mental health and professional side are kind of intertwined. But when I started the BPD bunch was 2022. That year, I didn't really find this out until later, but I think that's the year that my therapist took BPD off my chart. So I was still sort of actively managing symptoms, but I wasn't really having any major issues. And so that was sort of what made me feel confident to start moving forwards with the show and all of that.
So let me see if I got that. I'm going to try to mirror some of what you just said, summarize. So you make most of your income, or did, as a seamstress, which is honestly so cool. Nobody really ever says that, so that's one. And you had a job doing that. You were going to school for psychology in 2017, and then whenever you graduated, you quit
May 2022.
2022, yes, you graduated, right? And you quit your seamstress job, and then you got COVID, and then you were like, I can't do anything else. You've been thinking about starting the BPD bunch for a while, but what really pushed you over the edge was your therapist removed your BPD diagnosis off your chart during that time. Did I get
Well,
that?
I actually didn't know this until last year. So that wasn't like so it wasn't like that motivated me then. It was just at the time I felt like I was doing pretty well, and I have since found out that about that time my therapist took the diagnosis off my chart. But yeah.
Wow. What did you think of your experience in therapy? Like, can you talk more about your experience with therapy and what you think about that?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a huge can of worms. I mean, it depends on what at what point I I I guess I should start out by saying that I'm a big believer in therapy when it's a good fit. That said, I have had way more ineffective, horrible experiences than good ones. Um, and I think some of it just came down to like bad therapist client fit. I think there were definitely times when I wasn't ready and it wouldn't have really mattered what anyone said to me. But I did spend a long time in sort of free form talk therapy where you just go and there's not a lot of guidance or skill building or challenging or direction. And I think there probably are people who, don't have support at home, who really get value out of just being able to talk about their feelings. But that
Mhm.
was never really my issue. I've always been a big talker. I will, if you want to listen to me, I'll tell you all about my problems. Like that was never a problem for me. And so I think
Huh.
just having people listen to me, I think what I really needed was people to help me understand what the boundary conditions of reality are. And instead, I kind of feel like I spent a lot of time in those therapeutic relationships just kind of creating more maladaptive realities for myself. And then I ended up in a lockdown psych facility and a partial inpatient hospitalization program, and those kept me alive. And I think probably did learn some good things about it, learn some good things from there. But my experience was also that, like, when you put a bunch of people who are severely mentally unwell together, there's a very strong propensity for people to make each other worse. And if you don't have a strong, like mentalization based therapy is a therapy where it's a group therapy, and the goal is to try to understand, how you're thinking about things, how other people are thinking about things, um, and you practice that with each other. So, like, if I've never done MBT, but I've heard a lot about it. And so basically, if you were to be in a conflict with somebody in the group, like, you would use the MBT framework to try to work through that. And we didn't really have something that was that structured. Like, if they did have skills that were trying to get us to use, they did not make that explicit. And so I ended up in a lot of kind of damaging situations and relationships just because, like, when you're really doing poorly, like, yes, it's helpful to have somebody you can talk to who can relate to your experiences, but if those are the only people you're around, like, you need models for stable mental health looks like. It's not, to some degree, like, if you spend all of your time with people who are also sick, of course you're going to pick up more ways to be sick.
Yeah. So even in those situations, you didn't find, like, I guess I don't know, the teachers to be good models either? Or is
I
it just not that kind of relationship?
I do think that it's challenging. I mean, I guess I would say that I think when you're really, really unwell and the therapist is somebody who is sort of positioned as an authority figure, it's hard to really see them as a role model that you would want to emulate. And
Mhm.
I think that was difficult. Not that that could never be that way, but I just don't think it was set up to actually function that way.
Totally.
Um, and so then I spent a long time not really in therapy, and I finally found the DBT therapist who really changed my life in 2017, and that was really the most effective thing for me. I think because it was actionable skills, and there were a lot more, I think, deep work things to be done through the DBT process. And there's a lot, I think DBT sometimes gets a bad rap from people as being like, this is just a stress tolerance skills. Um, but my experience of DBT is that it is actually very comprehensive. If you see someone who is skilled and competent in administering it, and it was really, really effective for me. I think having, especially because my therapist challenged me. Actually, like this was the first therapist. Like I remember a conversation where she called me out for not working very hard because DBT has homework. Like you have homework that you take home. You're supposed to do it every day and bring it in. And it was obvious that I was like filling it in at the last second and, phoning it in. And she was basically like, girl, if you don't step it up, we've got a waiting list of people who really want to be here. So,
Mm.
and I was like, what? No, a therapist had never really called me out that way before. And that really motivated me to prove that I actually could make a change.
Interesting. So you needed that feedback of like almost like competitive, like sports or something like that. Do you have a background in I mean, you told me you have a background in performance. Can you actually take me back to like the beginning of your life and tell me like the story of how we even got here today?
Yeah, I will. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. So I was born in California. My parents were going back to school for the sciences. They met actually as a band teacher and choir director. And then they decided they didn't want to teach high schoolers forever. So they together went back to school for the sciences.
Mm.
Um, and I am told that I was a very emotional baby. And then as a toddler, I became very precocious, um, also very dramatic, like actor wise. Um, One time, I guess I remember this because I think I was 3 or 4, but I ran into the table and apparently I went, oh, I hurt my pelvis.
As a 3-year-old.
Um, so when I was 4, our family moved to Germany because my dad got a job there. So I learned German, and I really, as I remember it, I think I did pretty well in the German school system. It was a lot more concentrated. I don't know what the middle school and high school experience like is over there, but at least elementary school, like the days were shorter than they are here, and like challenging enough to keep things interesting.
Hmm.
My adolescence was pretty good, I guess. I started struggling in school when we came back to the US. I think that the long days, long lectures, don't move, and also things weren't quite challenging enough. And as I later found out, I have ADHD, so I really thrive in a more fast-paced, engaging environment. I started really struggling with my emotions and mental health when I hit puberty. I don't really it's re- it, it's not hard that it's hard to explain, but it just whenever I talk about this it makes me feel like so kind of pathetic because really like my childhood was great and then I hit puberty and I started having all these feelings and all of a sudden it was like the things that were easy and natural before, all of a sudden I was like, wait, how do I make relationships? How do I do this? How do I dress myself? Like I used to not think about this and now I have to pay attention to trends and all of these other just the social I don't know, there was something about puberty that just all of a sudden I was aware of things I'd never been aware of before and I did not know how to handle that.
Hmm.
And it just kind of got worse and worse and worse. I developed an eating disorder in my adolescence. I wrote a lot of music in high school. I played the guitar, the piano. I would do like the musicals and the plays whenever I got in. Because sometimes,
They didn't know who to choose.
actually, I think I got into everything I auditioned for. I just didn't get the parts that I wanted. So I
Uh,
would my 15-year-old brain is like it doesn't count if you get a flower number 2. Um,
r-
I Yeah, I was not doing so great. Relationships were not super. And then when I went off to college washed out because of my eating disorder, and so I went to eating disorder treatment.
Hmm.
And then after that, I met this girl in my acting class, and I became obsessed, and we started this really destructive on again, off again relationship. Um where, it was basically just a really bad combination of I was super attached and she had commitment issues. And so, like, the first few times she broke up with me, I was sad, but fine. And then I don't know, but over time it was like an addictive, problematic cycle. And I tried to kill myself a bunch of times. Obviously wasn't doing any art at that time. And that's when I ended up in the psych ward for lockdown and then the step down program, and um experienced a bunch of traumatic things.
Okay, so growing up, your life was kind of good, but also chaotic because you moved a lot. Germany, at a young age, you liked the school system there
Yeah.
because it was less hours and more engaging and more difficult, I guess. And then when you got
Yeah.
back to the US, you were like, I'm not learning anything. And like, you kind of found out later you had ADHD, but you were kind of like too, I don't know, fast for the school system, which I can also
Yeah.
um, relate to. And especially in America. That's cool that Germany's is good though. But kind of moved around following your dad for his jobs, and then got into an interesting relationship.
You can say destructive. It's true.
Well, no, I want to ask you more about that because
Yeah.
you're you said obsessed, like you became obsessed. So, do
Yeah.
you think that was part of like is that part of BPD, or what is that? You were
Yeah, I
attached.
mean, I think so that would be so in the BPD community we have this term favorite person. And it really is a relationship with someone who kind of becomes your identity. They're almost like a savior, and their attitude and mood towards you kind of dictates how you feel about yourself. So the dynamic is by definition pretty unhealthy.
Mhm.
And I didn't even realize like that it was a part of BPD until after it was already over. Um, because I don't think I heard the term favorite person until maybe like 4 years ago.
I
I don't
actually
know.
get like from you. I never even
Yeah, it's
had
not it's a very niche term, and to people outside the community, it means something totally different. Right.
okay.
So, because like everyone's like, "Oh, you're my favorite person." It's not the same thing if you have BPD.
Uh,
Um, and what's interesting about this relationship, so one of my friends, Dr. Alex Stein, who's a clinical psychologist, she actually just published some research on this, because a lot of people who have BPD talk about this favorite person concept. And so one of the things that she was interested in was not only defining what that is, but definitively saying that yes, this relationship is different than other relationships for people with BPD. And so far, I think she's doing more research on this, but so far, yes. So the FP dynamic is something different from just the normal relationship chaos that people with BPD have. I'd have to look up the paper to give you the specific findings on that, but I can say, at least from my experience, I don't think I've ever been so dependent on another person for my emotional well-being. Um, like there have been times where people will do something and I either feel happy or sad about it. And I've even lashed out at people in moments when I felt slighted, but like it was just this all consuming need for her to like me, for her to be happy with me. Um, I did some really, really wackadoodle stuff to try to keep that relationship. Like, I would run like, during some of the times when she'd broken up with me, I would run into her accidentally on purpose. It's a small where we were living is a small town, so, it was pretty easy for me to orchestrate situations in which we'd have to see each other. I would, like, befriend all of her friends so that she didn't have a way of getting away from me. Um, and gosh, I look back and it's just so cringy.
Looking back, do you have like compassion for yourself at that time now?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really understand what was happening. It was the first time I'd ever felt any emotions that extreme for any person ever.
Mm,
Um, and so I think sometimes when I talk about myself from the past, people interpret that I'm kind of judgmental. Um, but it's more that I can see that behavior more clearly now. And I mean, the me then though had no idea what was going on.
mm.
Like I remember my dad being like, "Why are you even in this relationship? Like I never hear anything good about it." Um and that hurt my feelings so much. I got so angry. I was like, "What are you like how dare you say that?" Um
Like
but
double down.
he was right. He was right. I just couldn't see it at the time.
It's so interesting, and it's actually interesting, like, I on the last episode, I talked to, her name's Annie Winters, and she was telling about her eating disorder, and I also had an eating disorder in the past too, and we were talking about how you can't really see it in yourself or, you obviously, you know that you're doing it on some level, but you're not really willing to, like, admit it even to yourself for a very long time, and, like, also the fact that, like, even when you get over the eating disorder, it's still that same thing is still in you in different ways, right? Like, it comes out in different types of ways, so
Yeah,
the
the
denial
eating
thing
disorder
is
thing is
is really
interesting.
interesting. Like, the denial of reality, right? Like, what is that? I mean, this is so cool because 'cause you're you studied psychology, so it's like did that help you? Was that, like, the main thing that helped you, is really studying psychology to understand?
So DBT was probably the most helpful thing, but I will say that studying psychology was helpful in being able to understand why certain things would work. Also to understand certain sort of basic concepts that like sometimes we're like, well, how do we learn to be a certain way? A lot of the times the behavior that people interpret in each other as being really intentional is really just a result of operant conditioning, which is where you act on your environment reacts in a particular way, and you just happen to maybe like is a strong word because sometimes you can be reinforced by things that make you feel badly if that was your goal. Um,
Mm.
because like for some people will engage in really out there behavior because they're seeking the intensity of the reaction that they get from other people, right? So like we would colloquially say like you're addicted to drama, right? But
Mhm.
that's a real thing that happens in the sense that you can be very drawn to conflict because that for whatever reason, there's sometimes it is, like your underlying beliefs, but a lot of the things that happen are based on operant conditioning, like and implicit learning, like things that we learned, but we didn't know that we learned them. Um, and I think stuff like that was helpful in understanding how I could end up the way that I was. I do think things like one of the most helpful concepts that I learned about in school was exposure. A lot of people who have anxiety believe that they need to avoid the things that make them anxious and they will be okay. And I mean, it depends on what the thing is that makes you anxious. Like standing at the edge of a cliff is supposed to make you anxious, and you probably don't want to do that if you're not hooked up or doing it on purpose because you might fall and die. But a lot of the not true life or death anxieties, people will they'll avoid their anxieties because they think that makes it better, but usually avoiding the things that makes you anxious just increases your anxiety. If you want
Hmm.
to decrease your anxiety, you have to expose yourself to the thing that makes you anxious to desensitize yourself. Um,
Wow.
so, and some of this is complicated because there are, it's also possible to sensitize yourself to some things even more depending on what it is. But, um, yeah, like the standard treatment for phobias is exposure.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. I wonder, like, so let's take Gen Z, for example, and they're all anxious, right? I mean, we're all anxious, like everybody's anxious. But I guess like social anxiety would be probably like the biggest common thing among the younger generations. So you're basically saying that in order to combat that, they just need to expose themselves, I guess, little by little to more social interactions.
Yeah, I mean, there is also a thing called flooding where you just jump off the deep end with exposure. Um, but that
I,
really has to be done with some pretty I wouldn't suggest that somebody does that on their own. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about social anxiety. It's funny because I've always been a fairly extroverted person, but after COVID, I started struggling more with social interactions. And to me, what that really says is that a lot of the a lot of our skills or lack of anxiety about things comes down to how practiced we are. It's kind of one of those, I think it's, this is my
hmm,
opinion, but given my experience, I think some of it's kind of use it or lose it,
yeah.
like, and the more I get back involved with other people, that social anxiety kind of goes away. Like I remember being at the park with my husband and our dog, and some other couple was talking to us, and I was like, what? I don't know how to have this conversation. What is happening right now?
Back to middle
That
school.
never happened to me before. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is what happens when you lock everybody up for 2 years."
Okay, so you said you're married now, right? Which congratulations.
Thank you.
What would you say your biggest like struggle is? Because I know relationships are something that people with BPD struggle with, and I struggle with too. So have you been able to overcome like everything, or what is still your like biggest pain point within a committed relationship?
It's funny because I always laugh when people ask me this stuff because yes, BPD has been was a struggle for us earlier in the relationship, but really, out of all my diagnoses, the one that's caused the most strain in our relationship has been ADHD
Huh.
because I am primarily inattentive. And so there are a lot of things that slip through the cracks and that read to my husband like I don't care about our shared responsibilities.
Right.
And so that's actually been the really the most difficult thing. Um, I think in the past, okay, so now I would say that most of the things that we deal with are not that different from ordinary couple things, right? Where you both come from different families. And so the way that you define and think about the world is a little bit different. And so, like, one partner can say something and the other can receive it totally different from the message that was intended. I think that's just one of the struggles of being human. And we usually work through our problems pretty effectively when they come up. I wouldn't say we don't have problems, because that's like, I think that's just a feature of relationships in general.
Yeah.
But when I still had BPD, I think the biggest problem for us was probably how I would interpret things that he said, and how quick I was to defensiveness and anger. Like, we would get in really big fights about really dumb things. So one day, this is when I still had BPD. We were working on it, but it was definitely still an active diagnosis. So I was invited to go up to see some of my extended family, and of course he was invited too, and he didn't want to go. And I lost my sugar honey iced tea, because in that moment I went from, oh no, he doesn't want to go with me, to, oh my gosh, are we going to be that couple where I have to do everything by myself, and I'm always having to drag him out of the house to do anything with me ever? Like, what am I going to say to people 5 years from now when they ask me why they never see my husband? Like, just this, like, wackadoodle, like 0 to 100, catastrophizing our future. And I actually think that happens with BPD a lot, where one thing in the moment, which is, yes, an issue, but really not that big, you catastrophize all the future ways in which this is going to come up again and be a problem. And so you feel like you have to solve this right now, or our relationship is over. And that used to happen. I can see you nodding. Yeah. So that used to happen.
Period.
That used to happen a lot. And it now, like, I might be irritated or upset at some way that he says something, but I think the last time we had a real significant argument was, did we have one this year?
Great question.
Might have been last year. I feel like we had one this year, but I can't remember what it is.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What? You can't even remember if you had an art. Okay, so, and you would attribute your getting past this, I guess, together, to you going through DBT. Like, that's what worked. That was it.
I wouldn't say just DBT. I mean, I think, everybody's different. I do think that becoming a Christian for me was really important, because faith in something bigger than myself, and specifically the Christian tradition, believes that, everyone has the inherent propensity for sin. And I think that was really important for me, because when people would try to tell me that underneath everything I was a good person, I just never felt like that was true.
Hmm.
It always felt like, you just don't see me. And so when I came across this idea that, oh, everyone has this inherent propensity for sin, and really what it's all about how you manage it, and how, the idea that we're all sort of inherently we're kind of all inherently it messed up. It also made it easier for me to be not like more understanding of other people, because if
Mhm.
I believe that everybody is inherently good, then it feels more like a choice when they're not, versus if I believe that everyone sort of inherently has this drive to be at least self-serving, then I'm not surprised when they're a jerk. And when they're nice, I can it's more like, wow, like, you overcame the inner darkness that we all have to be a good person in this moment. Like, that's an accomplishment. Good for you.
Yep.
And so I think that was like the biggest thing that from, and I mean, and also the belief that there's more to it. But I think, like, the thing that specifically changed my relationships was that belief, because it helped me to let go of this idea that people should just know to treat me better. Because a lot of the times I had this idea in my head that everyone should just know that this is going to hurt my feelings, or that I'm going to react some way. And, now that I don't have BPD anymore, I've had conversations with both my parents and my brother, and I asked them, like, what was one of the hardest things for you to understand about BPD? And they were like, we just couldn't understand why you would do the things that were so obviously destructive. Like, they didn't get it. Like, so how could I have possibly have expected them to actually understand what was going on in my head?
Right.
So I think DBT, becoming Christian, and I think honestly, my mom has been probably a real inspiration to me, because I mean, this used to piss me off because I didn't understand it, but she's always viewed challenges as opportunities for growth. And like, she has this saying, there's no point in doing a job you already know how to do. Because the idea for her is to always be growing and becoming the next best version of yourself all the time. And as much as I can, I have tried to adopt that mindset, because I think sometimes when you struggle with your mental health, it feels like you that there is some end point that you should get to, and then once you're there, I don't know, I expected I would get to some point and then I would not be having to work so hard on myself anymore. And I think that's bullshit. I think if you're a human in this world doing anything, you're always working on yourself in some way, shape, or form. Like, the quality of it changes. The stakes may not be as high, right? After, like, if you really struggle with suicidality and you sort of overcome that, like, the next thing you're working on might not be quite as life or death. But to be human, I think, is to have some amount of struggle. And I find I'm the most depressed when I'm not trying to do something. And I don't mean like this hyper productivity work mode. Like, I just mean having purposeful goals that give your life meaning, even if that's that, and that doesn't have to be career stuff either. It can be like having a good relationship with your spouse, taking good care of your pets, whatever. I think just having those things that give you purpose and make it worth it to constantly keep trying to show up better and better and better. I mean, now I'm kind of hooked on that growth, because it's just when you allow yourself to believe that there's no limit to how far you can grow, it really is pretty amazing what you can do. All right, so if you have BPD and you want BPD specific content, you can find us at the BPD Bunch on Instagram, YouTube. We have a Spotify and a Patreon. Our patrons make everything possible, because I could not afford all of our software and stuff every year without them. So definitely, our Patreon is pretty cool. We got some extra exclusive videos there. So if you like the BPD Bunch, definitely go support us there. And then my personal Instagram and YouTube are at Xannabelle. I've started this year doing more videos where I just going on rants about different things that didn't really feel on brand for the BPD Bunch. So they're a little bit more hard truths, I guess. A little less filtered.
Sick. Looking forward to those. And thank you for
Thank you.
sharing so much. I'm really excited for, what we can mission accomplish together. And I'm excited to be on the BPD Bunch next month too.
Yeah, we're looking forward to having you. It's gonna be great.
My biggest takeaways from Xannie were Authenticity isn't about you, it's about your audience. Christians look at things very interestingly, which is that all humans are sinners inherently, and so if people are doing good, they should get their props. That's a very weirdly pessimistic and optimistic way to look at humanity. Also, man, I just feel like a lot of the struggles she was naming, I struggled and, kind of continue to struggle with. Stay tuned for my episode on Xannie's podcast, The BPD Bunch. And if you guys like this podcast episode, if it did something for you, please send it to a friend and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. That was Xannie. I'm your host, Megan A. Tully, and this has been Is There More? Thanks for listening.